The evening had barely begun when the restaurant's main hall started filling with people. Soft music played from hidden speakers, the kind that blended into the background so guests could focus on their drinks and conversations. Staff moved quickly, polishing glasses, ranging plates, making sure everything was set before the dinner rush. In the middle of all that noise and movement, a young worker swept the floor near the raised platform where an old, grand piano stood. It was the restaurant's pride piece, a beautiful instrument with a polished surface that caught the light in a perfect shine. He tried not to look at it for too long. Every time he did, something inside him tugged, as if old memories were reaching out from a place he tried hard to lock away. So he kept his eyes down, focusing on the broom in his hands, hoping the night would pass like any other. But the peace didn't last. The restaurant owner walked in surrounded by a small group of wealthy guests. He enjoyed an audience and never wasted a chance to show off. His laugh echoed across the room long before he reached the center, and everyone, including the workers, knew the tone well. It meant he had spotted something or someone he wanted to use for his entertainment. His eyes landed on the young worker sweeping the floor. "You there?" the owner called out loudly, waving a hand as if summoning a pet. A few of his guests chuckled already, waiting to see what he had planned. The worker paused, straightened his posture, and turned, unsure what he had done wrong. The owner pointed at the piano behind him. "Tell me something," he said with a grin. "Do you know how much that instrument is worth?" The worker shook his head. He tried to keep his expression calm, though his heart was beating faster now. He didn't like being the center of attention, and he especially didn't like it when people laughed for reasons he didn't understand. "A fortune," the owner declared. "More than anything you've ever touched in your life. I promise you that." His guests laughed politely, some a bit too loudly. The worker felt his face warm with embarrassment, but he stayed quiet. Then the owner leaned back with a smug smile. "Tell you what," he said, "I'll make you a deal." He placed one hand on the piano as if displaying a trophy. "I'll give you $1,000 if you can play a single note on this piano." A few guests gasped playfully. Some nudged each other. Others waited with amused smirks. They saw it as a joke. The owner clearly didn't expect anything. His voice carried that tone, the kind that said he already knew the outcome. He believed the worker would be too nervous, or too inexperienced, to even touch the keys. And deep down, he enjoyed the idea of watching someone stumble under pressure. The worker didn't answer right away. He looked at the piano, then at the owner, trying to understand why this challenge mattered so much to these people. He wasn't angry, just confused. Why would anyone offer such a large amount just to see someone tap a piano key? Then he realized they weren't expecting him to actually do it. They only wanted a moment of entertainment at his expense. His co-workers, watching from the sides, exchanged worried glances. They knew how the owner liked to embarrass employees when he was in a playful mood. One of the servers subtly shook her head at him, silently urging him to ignore the challenge. But another staff member whispered that refusing might make things worse. The air felt heavy with the tension. The owner crossed his arms. "Well," he said loudly, $1,000 for one little tap. You don't even need talent, just courage." More laughter. The worker took a slow breath. He didn't want to give them a show, but he also wasn't afraid of touching the piano. Not the way they assumed he would be. The instrument didn't intimidate him. What intimidated him was the thought of remembering, of letting his hands reconnect with something he had walked away from long ago. Still, he stepped forward. The room quieted slightly, surprised that he wasn't backing down. He approached the platform, each step measured and careful. The polished wood reflected the warm lights above, and the piano itself looked almost too grand, too perfect. He reached out and brushed the edge lightly with his fingers, feeling the smooth finish. The owner raised his eyebrows with a mocking smile. "Look at that," he said to his guests. "Maybe he'll actually try." The worker didn't respond. His focus drifted to the keys. He remembered sitting beside someone years ago, watching big, gentle hands guide his smaller ones across the same pattern of black and white. He remembered how the notes used to feel less like sound and more like breath. He pushed the memory aside. All they wanted was one note, one simple touch. He pulled in a breath and lowered himself onto the piano bench. The seat was familiar, almost too familiar, and for a moment he paused, wondering if he should continue. Behind him, the guests whispered, amused, curious, entertained. The owner smirked. "Go on," he said. "Let's see if you can manage this impossible task." There was no kindness in his tone, only sarcasm wrapped in confidence. The worker lifted his hand. He hovered it above the keys. His fingers trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from the weight of returning to something he hadn't touched in a long time. Something he thought he had left behind for good. The room fell into a deeper silence. It was strange how quiet people became when they expected someone to embarrass themselves. The worker lowered his finger toward a single white key. Before he touched it, he could feel every eye on him. The guests waiting, the owner smiling, his co-workers holding their breath. Even the air seemed to pause. In that moment, he felt a mix of emotions: nervousness, pressure, and a faint spark of something he hadn't felt in years. Something warm, something sharp, something that came from his past. But he didn't let the emotions show. He only focused on the key. Then, with a soft and steady motion, he pressed down. A single, clear note rang out. It was simple, pure, clean. It drifted through the hall like a small drop of light. Gentle but unmistakable. No one expected it to sound like that. The owner's smirk faltered. The guests leaned forward. Something had shifted in the room. Though no one could explain what or why, they only felt it: the sudden stillness, the strange quiet, the way the note seemed to carry more weight than $1,000 joke. The worker lifted his hand off the key, but the echo of the note lingered. He sat there silently, unsure whether he had just made things better or worse. He had followed the challenge exactly. One note. Nothing more. Yet somehow, that single sound felt like the beginning of something none of them saw coming. Part to the note she played at the end of the first part still echoed in her mind, long after the camera stopped recording and the stage lights dimmed. She stood backstage now, holding her violin with both hands as if it were the only thing keeping her steady. A staff member guided her toward a small waiting area, where all contestants sat after their performances. Some looked nervous, some excited, and some tried to act calm even though their legs bounced restlessly. She quietly took a seat in the corner, her hands still trembling from what had just happened on stage. It wasn't the performance itself that shook her. It was everything that happened before she even played. The maestro's words repeated in her head like an echo she couldn't escape. His tone, his expression, the way he made the entire room feel like she didn't belong there. She tried to breathe slowly, reminding herself that she had played countless times before, at home, in school, at her small community center, but none of those moments involved being judged on live television, in front of millions. None of those moments involved a man who carried such power in the music world. None of those moments involved someone telling her she wasn't good enough, before she even had the chance to prove otherwise. A producer walked by and offered her a quick smile. "You did great out there," he said softly. She nodded, but she didn't feel great. She felt confused. And she felt something deeper too. Something that had started forming the moment the maestro repeated the name of her chosen piece. Why did he react that way? She thought about asking someone, but she didn't want to seem unsure. She didn't want to give anyone the impression that she didn't belong here, especially after everything she had already faced on stage. The other contestants eventually drifted away to prepare for the next segment, leaving her alone for a moment. She placed her violin case on her lap and opened it slowly. Inside was a small, worn photograph tucked in the corner. It showed her father sitting by the window of their old apartment, holding the same violin she carried now. He had taught her everything she knew. He never forced her into music. He never pressured her to master difficult pieces. He simply played, and she listened. And when she was old enough, he placed the violin in her hands and told her that music would always find a way to speak for her, even when she couldn't find her voice. But the piece she chose for the show, Reverie in the Storm, was special for a reason. She never said aloud, it was the last piece her father ever played for her. The last melody she heard from him before he became too ill to perform. He hadn't finished it that night. His hands were shaking too much. But he smiled at her and said, "Maybe one day you'll finish it for me." She held on to those words for years. Now that he was gone, she carried that promise everywhere she went. She closed her eyes and pictured him sitting across from her, tapping his foot gently as he always did when he wanted her to follow the rhythm. She let that memory calm her for a moment. But then, without warning, the sound of hushed voices reached her from down the hall. "Did you hear him?" Someone whispered. "Yeah." He got really tense when she said the name of the piece. "Did you see his face?" "I think everyone saw it. He's usually strict, but that was different. Almost personal." She leaned slightly forward, listening without meaning to. "I heard he had some kind of bad moment with that composition years ago." The voice continued. "Big event. Big stage. He couldn't finish it. People talked about it for months." The teenager's eyes widened. "No way." Someone else whispered. "He failed on stage, him?" "That's what they say. But it got buried pretty fast." Reporters stopped talking about it. The orchestra didn't bring it up again. It just sort of disappeared. Her heart started beating faster. She wasn't sure what to think. She didn't know this part of his past. No one had ever mentioned it. She had grown up hearing about his brilliance, his leadership, his perfection. Not once had she heard that he messed up. Not once had she heard he walked off stage without finishing a piece. And yet the moment she said the name of the composition, she saw something in his eyes that didn't match the image everyone had always painted of him. Fear. Or maybe frustration. Or maybe both. She leaned back in her chair, letting the information settle in her chest. It felt strange to learn that the man who criticized her so sharply had once struggled with the same piece. She had spent years trying to master another. Memory surfaced, her father once telling her that even the greatest musicians had moments they wished they could forget, moments that taught them something about themselves. She wondered if the maestro had ever learned from his. Before she could think further, a production assistant walked into the room and called her name. "The judges want all contestants back on set for the next round," he said. She stood up slowly, closing her violin case and holding it securely. As she walked toward the hallway, she couldn't help but glance toward the direction of the judges' room. She knew she shouldn't let her emotions get the better of her. She knew she needed to stay focused, but now she was carrying something new with her, knowledge that changed how she saw the situation. The maestro didn't just think she wasn't ready. He was reacting to something from his past. She followed the assistant through the hallway, passing by crew members adjusting equipment and fixing cables. They all moved quickly, knowing the show had strict timing. At the end of the hall, she saw the stage again, bright and polished and intimidating in a way she hadn't fully appreciated before. She tightened her grip on the violin case. When she stepped onto the stage again, the audience was already settling in. The lights warmed up, and the cameras pointed toward the judges. They were discussing something quietly among themselves. The maestro looked calm again, but she recognized something in his expression. Now something she had missed before. It wasn't confidence. It was the look of someone who didn't want the past brought to the surface. When the contestants gathered on stage, the host walked forward with a cheerful smile, trying to keep the energy light. "Welcome back, everyone. We're moving on to the next part of our show. We'll be speaking with each contestant about their musical journey and what brought them here." The host's voice carried warmth, helping ease the tension. One by one, the contestants shared their stories. Some talked about supportive families, others about teachers who pushed them to grow, and some spoke about dreams that started long before they understood the world around them. When her turn came, she felt dozens of eyes on her. She didn't know how much she should share. She didn't want to bring up her father's illness. She didn't want to make her story sound sad or heavy. She wanted her journey to sound like hers, not something shaped for television. The host smiled kindly. "Tell us what inspired your performance today." She glanced down for a moment, then looked back up. "I played it because it means a lot to me," she said softly. "Someone close to me loved that piece. I wanted to honor him." The audience listened closely. The maestro shifted in his seat. "And I practiced for years," she continued. "Not because I wanted to prove anything, just because I felt connected to it." The maestro tapped his fingers against the table, but didn't speak. The host nodded. "That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us." She gave a small smile, but inside, her thoughts were tangled. Why did the maestro react the way he did when he heard the name of the piece? Why did it bother him so much? And why did something about his expression look familiar, like someone trying to hide something? After the interviews ended, the judges were given time to discuss among themselves. The contestants were guided off the stage once more, but before she left, she caught a glimpse of the maestro leaning toward the other judges, whispering something she couldn't hear. One of the judges nodded slowly. Another looked unsure. She walked backstage again, but something in her chest felt heavier now. She wasn't scared anymore, not the way she had been before. Instead, she felt curious. The maestro wasn't just strict, he was hiding something. And the piece she played wasn't just difficult. It was a shadow from his past. She didn't know what the next part of the show would hold. But one thing was clear now. This wasn't just about music anymore. It was about truth, pride, and a moment he hoped the world had forgotten. And she had unknowingly brought it back to light. Part 3. When she stepped onto the stage again for the next performance round, the air felt very different than before. The first time she stood here, she could barely breathe. Her hands had shaken, her heart raced, and all she could think about was the maestro's voice echoing in her mind. But now, something inside her had shifted. She didn't feel fearless, but she felt steadier, as though the truth she learned about his past had given her a quiet strength. The lights were bright, just as they always were. The camera slowly moved into position. The audience whispered softly, filling the room with a low hum that always came right before something important. She held her violin close, the wood warmed by her hands. The bow felt firm instead of slippery like it had earlier. She could feel her breathing settle the more she focused on the familiar weight of the instrument. This was the performance that mattered most. It wasn't just a test of skill. It was the one she had prepared for since she was a child. It was the one her father dreamed she would play someday. And after what she had heard backstage, she knew the maestro would be watching her even more closely than before. The host stood at center stage, smiling brightly for the cameras. "Welcome back, everyone. This round gives our young performers the chance to show their full abilities. No interviews, no breaks, just pure music from the heart." The host's voice carried a warmth that helped wash away some of the tension. Then the host turned to her. "And now, our next performer. Earlier today, she surprised everyone with her courage. Now she returns to play the full version of the piece she loves most." She stepped forward under the spotlight. Her shoes made a soft tap on the polished floor. She took her place at the center of the stage. The room fell silent again, waiting. The maestro sat still, but his eyes were fixed on her. His expression was unreadable. Not angry, not amused, but something else, something tight, controlled, almost holding back emotion. She didn't look at him for long. She closed her eyes instead, letting the silence wrap around her like a blanket. And then she remembered, her father's hands guiding hers, his voice whispering, "Let the music breathe," his smile when she finally played a passage right, the way he looked at her violin like it was part of their family. She took a breath and raised her bow. The first note came gently, soft like a whisper at the start of a story. It floated through the air, smooth and fragile. The crowd leaned in. Even the judges seemed to hold their breath. The second note followed, stronger than the first. And then the third, rising just a little. Her fingers danced across the strings with a familiarity born from years of practice. Every shift of her hand, every tilt of the bow felt natural, connected to something deep inside her. The melody grew slowly at first, like the calm before a storm. The piece was named Reverie in the Storm for a reason. It began with softness, a dream-like haze, and grew into something powerful and wild. She poured her heart into each measure. She didn't think about the cameras, the lights, or the millions watching at home. She didn't think about the maestro's harsh words or the laughter from the audience earlier. She didn't think about the pressure of performing on such a big stage. She thought only about her father, and the promise she made to him. For a moment, she wasn't on a stage. She was in their small apartment again, sunlight coming through the thin curtains, her father tapping his foot lightly on the floor. She could almost hear him humming along. But then the music shifted, rising sharply. The storm part of the composition began. Her bow moved faster, the notes climbing and twisting with emotion. The melody demanded control and strength to things the maestro said she didn't have. Her heart raced, but her hands stayed steady. She had practiced this passage hundreds of times. She knew where to breathe, where to press harder, where to let the bow glide. She could feel the audience reacting, the quiet gasps, the shivers, the way people leaned forward as if drawn into the music. She reached the most difficult part of the piece, the part where the melody soared to its highest point, filled with both pain and beauty. This was the part her father never finished. She played it now with everything inside her. Her eyes stayed closed. She let her emotions guide her instead of fear. Her bow moved in smooth arcs, her fingers pressing firmly. Her breath matched the rhythm of the song. Every sound she created filled the room until the stage seemed to fall away. When she opened her eyes, the maestro was still watching her, but his expression had changed. His jaw wasn't tight anymore. His shoulders weren't stiff. His eyes held something, like shock, something he wasn't used to showing. It was the expression of someone hearing a piece, played the way he wished he could have played it himself. Her focus stayed on the music. The melody shifted again, softening as the storm faded into calm. Her bow slowed, the notes becoming gentle, warm, almost soothing. The room felt different now, as though everyone was breathing in sync with her. She finished the final passage with the softest stroke of the bow, letting the last note hang in the air just long enough to settle into every ear. When the sound faded, there was complete silence. No one clapped. No one moved. It wasn't because they didn't like it. It was because they were stunned, and she felt it. She felt the room holding its breath around her. She felt the weight of what she had just done. Her heart thumped hard in her chest. but not out of fear, out of release. Then the silence broke. The audience erupted into applause so loud it filled the entire studio. People stood up, clapping, cheering, some even wiping tears from their eyes. The sound washed over her, warm and overwhelming. The host looked amazed. The other judges exchanged looks of disbelief. And the maestro, he didn't join the applause at first. He just stared at her, his eyes softened. And for the first time since she met him, he looked less like a strict judge and more like a flawed human being. He finally stood up, not dramatically, not angrily, but slowly, like someone who had just learned something they weren't prepared to face. The applause quieted as people noticed him rising. He cleared his throat. The microphone caught the soft sound. He looked at her, and for a long moment, he didn't speak. The silence felt heavy, but not the cold kind from earlier. It felt meaningful. "You played the piece I once failed to finish," he said softly, his voice steady but honest. The audience murmured. It was the first time he ever acknowledged it publicly. He continued, "I tried to perform it many years ago, at a concert that mattered deeply to me. I couldn't complete it. I walked away from the stage, and the moment stayed with me for a long time." She listened quietly, her violin still in her hands. "I thought I had moved past it," he said. "But when you said the name of the piece earlier today, I felt something I haven't felt in years. Fear, shame, a reminder of the moment I wasn't strong enough." The crowd watched him closely. He looked down for a moment, then back at her. "I doubted you because I doubted myself. I didn't want to see someone else attempt what I failed at." The teenager didn't know what to say. She felt a knot in her chest, not from fear or anger, but from empathy. The maestro continued, "But you didn't just play it. You owned it. You brought a depth and honesty to the piece that even I couldn't achieve." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "I was wrong to discourage you." The audience gasped again. He nodded slowly, acknowledging the truth behind his words. "You have shown bravery and heart, and you reminded me of why music matters in the first place." Then, in a gesture no one expected, he stepped back slightly and clapped just once, loudly. The audience followed with thunderous applause. She breathed deeply, feeling her chest loosen. For the first time all day, she hadn't just played the piece, she had healed something she didn't know needed healing, and she had changed the way the maestro and everyone else saw her, not as a scared teenager, but as a true musician. He woke up before the lights in the room brightened, which told him he had barely slept. His mind had been too full. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the moment the barrier wall cracked, the moment the young heir stood behind him trembling, and the moment he had thrown himself forward without thinking. He still felt the echo of that moment inside his chest like a memory that refused to fade. Now he found himself in a quiet guest room inside the alien palace. It was almost peaceful, but something about the silence felt heavy, as if the walls were waiting to hear what he would do next. He slowly sat up and let his feet rest on the floor. The smooth stones were warm, almost alive with soft energy. Nothing on this world ever felt natural to him, yet he was beginning to get used to the way things hummed here. He breathed out slowly, trying to clear his thoughts, but the air itself carried a faint scent that reminded him where he was. He was still on the alien homeworld, still under watch, still tangled in a situation that had grown too large for one person. A gentle knock sounded on the door, breaking the stillness. He stood and opened it. The young heir stood on the other side, holding a small tray with food and something that looked like warm tea. Their eyes lifted to meet his, soft and unsure. "I brought this for you," they said quietly. "Mother said you might not want to attend breakfast in the main hall." He thanked them and took the tray. The heir stepped inside cautiously, as if unsure whether they were welcome. He didn't mind. Their presence had become familiar, and despite the trouble that had started everything, he felt no resentment toward them. "I couldn't sleep much," the heir said. "The council is meeting again today. They keep arguing about you. Some think you should be honored, some think you should be sent away, and some—" The heir stopped, lowering their head. He waited, giving them space. "Some think you should never be allowed to leave," the heir finally said. "Mother, she sees you as a symbol now, someone who proved that our people and your people don't have to fear each other." He nodded, even though inside he felt that weight pressing harder. "Do you think she will ever let me return home?" he asked. The heir hesitated but didn't look away. "I don't know," they whispered. "She listens to the council, but she also follows her heart, and her heart is complicated right now." He sat down, placing the tray on a small table. The food smelled mild and comforting. The heir stood near the window, looking out at the sky where several floating platforms drifted slowly. carrying families, workers, and supplies from one tower to another. I'm sorry you got caught in all this, the heir said softly. It wasn't your fault, he replied. I made my own choice that day. He meant it. He had acted on instinct, not politics. And even though the situation had grown messy, he didn't regret protecting them. The heir turned back to him, studying him for a moment. You're different from the stories we were told, they said. Humans were always described as unpredictable, dangerous. But you weren't dangerous at all. You were brave. He felt a slight embarrassment at that but didn't argue. Soon, another knock sounded, this one firmer. When the door slid open, one of the palace advisors stepped in. Their expression was polite but tense. The council has asked for your presence, the advisor said. They want to speak with you directly. The heir's eyes widened. Already? They said they would meet later. Things have changed, the advisor replied. There are new reports from the border territories. It concerns the attack that injured the young heir. He straightened. What kind of reports? He asked. There are rumors that your people are preparing to send a rescue team, the advisor said. Or possibly a retrieval squad. The council wishes to know whether you were aware of this. He shook his head. I've been here. I haven't spoken to anyone from home. Then you should tell them that yourself, the advisor said. The heir stepped forward anxiously. I'll go with him, they said. The advisor nodded reluctantly. The queen has granted you permission to attend, but remain quiet unless spoken to. Together they walked through long hallways that opened into towering arches. The palace felt larger today, as if seriousness had stretched the walls. He noticed more guards, more hushed voices, more hurried footsteps. The council chamber was a huge circular room with layered platforms of seats rising upward. The members were already gathered, their robes flowing like slow-moving currents of color. At the center stood a single glass-like platform, waiting for him. The queen sat on her throne behind the council circle. Her posture was calm, but her eyes held a storm beneath them. When he stepped forward, the chamber quieted. Human, one council member said in a clear voice. We have received word that a vessel from your home region was seen approaching our border space. Some believe it may be connected to your presence here. Do you have any knowledge of this mission? No, he answered plainly. I didn't know anything about it. Another council member leaned forward. Would your people attempt to extract you by force? No, he said again. They wouldn't risk a conflict. And yet, a third voice spoke. They seem willing to send a ship. Why would they do that if they did not believe you were in danger? He paused, choosing his words carefully. Maybe they're worried, he said. Maybe they heard something that made them think I'm being held here against my will. The council members exchanged glances. The queen finally spoke. Are you being held against your will? Her question hung in the air like a weight. The room grew so still that he could hear the hum from the floating lights above. He looked at her, feeling the eyes of everyone in the chamber fixed on him. I'm not harmed, he said honestly, and I'm not treated like a prisoner. But I don't know if I'm free to leave. A murmur spread across the chamber. The queen's expression tightened. If you wish to leave, she said, why have you not asked? He didn't answer right away. He thought of the air, of the quiet talks they had shared, of the strange warmth he'd begun to feel when walking the palace gardens. Because I wanted to understand why you kept me here, he said softly. The queen's eyes softened, but only for a moment. Another council member spoke up quickly. This situation is dangerous, they said. If the human ship crosses our borders, the tension between our worlds could rise. We need to act before rumors turn into panic. The queen looked at him again. If you speak to your people, she said, can you calm them? Can you explain that you are safe? He nodded. I'll try. Then it is decided, the queen said. You will send a message, and until we receive a reply, you will remain here under palace protection. He felt the weight of those words. Under protection, not quite free, but he agreed. All right, I'll do it. The queen's gaze lingered on him a little too long, and then the council session was dismissed. He and the heir walked out together. Once they were alone in the hallway, the heir exhaled. I thought they were going to blame you, the heir said. They're scared, he replied, and fear makes people jump to conclusions. They walked a bit farther before the heir stopped. Can I ask you something? He nodded. When you said you didn't know if you were free, did you mean that you want to leave? The question felt heavier than anything the council had asked. He took a breath, staring at the glowing patterns running along the wall. I want to go home someday, he said, but I don't want to disappear without understanding this place. And I don't want to leave without saying things that should be said. The heir looked relieved, though still uncertain. I'm glad, they whispered, Later, he was taken to a communication room. It was quiet, almost too quiet. A single device sat in the center, waiting for him to activate it. "Record your message," the guard said. "Make it clear that you are safe." He nodded and stepped forward. The device lit up as he began speaking. He kept his voice steady, calm. "This is a message to anyone searching for me. I'm alive. I'm not harmed. I'm being treated with respect. There is no conflict here. Please avoid entering their space unless absolutely necessary. I will return when the time is right." He finished, and the device powered down. The guard approved the message and sent it. Once he was alone again, he let out a slow breath. He hoped the message reached home before things became worse. As he walked back toward his room, he noticed someone waiting for him near the gardens. It was the Queen. She stood quietly among the glowing plants, her presence commanding but calm. "You spoke gently in your message," she said. "I expected you to demand freedom." "That wouldn't help anything," he replied. She stepped closer, her eyes studying him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Many see you as a symbol of peace," she said. "But I see someone who acted with courage because it was right, not because of politics. That is rare." He didn't know how to respond, so he simply listened. "Until your people reply," she said, "stay close to the palace. There are those who fear what you represent, and I will not let harm come to you." He nodded slowly. The Queen held his gaze for another moment before turning to leave. As she walked away, the heir approached carefully from behind a nearby pillar. "She's trying to protect you," the heir said. He watched the Queen disappear into the corridor. "I know," he said quietly. The day felt long after that. He returned to his room, but sleep still refused to come. He lay awake, staring at the dim ceiling, thinking about everything: the council, the Queen, the heir, his home, the ship approaching the border. Things were changing faster than he could grasp. He didn't know what he woke with a tight feeling in his chest, the kind that came before something important. He didn't know why at first, but as he sat up, memories from the day before rushed back. The message he had sent home, the council's tense mood, the Queen's calm but heavy words, and, more than anything else, the thought that his future was no longer just in his hands. The sky outside his window had a soft golden glow, as if the sun were taking its time rising. He walked to the balcony and stepped out. The view was peaceful: floating platforms drifting, tall towers shining faintly, and thin mist weaving between them. It didn't look like a world on the edge of trouble, but deep inside, he knew things were shifting. He stayed there until he heard a knock on his door. When he opened it, the young heir stood there again, looking much more restless than usual. "There's news," the heir said quietly. "It came early. A reply from your people." His heart jumped. "What did they say?" The heir motioned for him to follow. "Mother wants to tell you herself." They walked through the halls in silence. Even the guards seemed tense. It felt like the whole palace was holding its breath. When they reached the private council room, the Queen was waiting alone. That itself was unusual. She usually had at least 2 advisors with her. She dismissed the heir with a gentle wave, and they stepped out of the room, closing the door behind them. Then she turned to him. "Your people received your message," she said. "They sent a reply during the night." He nodded, trying to read her expression. "What did they say?" he asked. The Queen looked at him for a long moment before answering. "They want you back," she said. "They said their ship will not enter our space, but they request permission to meet you at the border. They are waiting for our decision." A long breath escaped him. For the first time in days, he felt something close to relief. But the Queen wasn't finished. "The council is divided," she said. "Some say allowing you to leave will show goodwill. Others fear it will spark confusion and distrust among our people, who already see you as a sign of change." He took that in quietly. "And what do you think?" he asked. The Queen walked closer, her step slow and firm. "I think," she said softly, "that letting you go is the right thing. But I also believe your departure will leave a mark on this world, on my child and on me." He wasn't sure what to say. He felt a strange heaviness settle inside him, something that wasn't sadness exactly, but close. The Queen lifted her hand slightly, as if wanting to touch his shoulder, but she stopped herself. "You came here by accident," she said. "Yet your presence changed the conversations in this palace. You changed how my child sees the world. You changed how I see your kind." He swallowed gently. "I didn't mean to change anything." Her eyes softened in a way he hadn't seen before. Sometimes change happens simply because someone chooses kindness when they didn't have to. He looked away, suddenly overwhelmed. He had come here thinking he was just trying to survive, just trying to do the right thing in a moment of danger. He hadn't known it would lead to all this. The queen stepped back and breathed deeply. "We will discuss the travel arrangements today," she said. "You will not be sent away like a captive. You will be escorted with honor." He nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said. "There is one more thing," the queen added. "The heir wishes to speak with you before the council meets again. They felt you deserved a proper farewell." Her voice softened at the last word. He felt something tighten in his chest again. A farewell. The word felt real now. Heavy. He left the room quietly and found the heir waiting outside. Hands clasped nervously. "What did she say?" the heir asked. He told them everything. The reply from his people, the queen's decision, the council's concerns, and the fact that he might be leaving soon. The heir's face fell. "So it's true," they whispered. They walked together toward the garden without speaking. The air there felt lighter, but it didn't make the moment easier. The heir sat on the edge of a low stone bench, looking down at their hands. "I know you want to go home," they said softly, "and I understand, but I didn't think it would happen so soon." He sat beside them. "I didn't think any of this would happen," he admitted. The heir glanced up at him, eyes shining with emotion they were trying hard to hide. "When the barrier wall broke," they whispered, "and you stepped in front of me, I felt something I'd never felt before. Not fear, not shock, but safety. Like someone cared about my life even though they had no reason to." He felt warmth in his chest at their words. "Anyone would have done the same," he said. The heir shook their head. "No," they said firmly. "People freeze in moments like that, or they run. But you didn't. You acted without thinking of yourself. That means something." He didn't know how to respond. The truth was, he had acted without thinking, but hearing how much it meant to them made the moment heavier. The heir looked down again. "When you leave," they said quietly, "this place will not feel the same. Mother says you changed our home. I think you changed me most of all." He placed a gentle hand on their shoulder. "You changed me too," he said honestly. They looked up at him with a small, sad smile. "Promise me something," the heir said. He nodded. "What is it?" "Don't forget this world. Don't forget what happened here, even if you never return." He felt the weight of their request. "I won't forget," he said. They sat there for a long moment, letting silence speak for them. A guard approached then, bowing respectfully. "The council is ready," the guard said. "They await both of you." The heir wiped their eyes quickly, stood tall, and walked beside him toward the chamber. Inside, the council had gathered once again, but this time the room felt different, not tense, not fearful, but solemn. The queen stood at the center. "We have reached our decision," she said as he approached. "You will be allowed to meet your people at the border. We will escort you with honor and ensure your safety." There were nods from around the room, however. One council member added, "We request that this meeting be peaceful and public, so our people can see that there is no hostility between our worlds." He agreed immediately. "There is one more matter," the queen said. She stepped closer. "Your actions here have left a deep impression. I would like to offer you a formal title and honorary role in our world, should you ever choose to return." The room murmured in approval. He felt stunned. I don't know what to say," he admitted. "Then, simply accept it as a bridge between our people," the queen replied. Gently. He bowed his head slightly. "Thank you," he whispered. The queen nodded. "Prepare yourself," she said. "You will leave at dawn." The council dismissed soon after. The heir stood beside him, looking like they wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. He offered a small smile. "We still have today," he said. The heir nodded, relief softening their face. They spent the rest of the day walking through the palace, visiting the floating platforms, sharing quiet moments in the gardens, and talking about stories from their worlds. It felt slow and gentle, like the final pages of a chapter that neither of them wanted to end. That night, the queen invited him to a private farewell dinner. Nothing grand, just a quiet table with soft lights, simple food, and warm company. The heir sat beside him, and the queen across from them. They talked not about politics, ships, or danger but about small things, childhood stories, old memories, moments that made them laugh. When the dinner ended, the queen looked at him with calm eyes. "You changed the direction of my people," she said softly, "and for that, you will always be remembered here." He felt humbled. "Thank you," he said. The queen stood. "Rest now. Tomorrow begins a new path for you." He returned to his room and packed the few things he had been given. Then he sat on his bed, staring at the dim lights on the ceiling. He had come here by accident. He was leaving with memories he would never forget. At dawn, the palace gathered quietly. The Queen and the heir walked with him to the transport platform that would carry them to the border. The heir stood close to him. "This isn't goodbye forever," they whispered. He nodded. Slowly. "I hope not." The Queen placed a hand over her heart in a gesture of respect. "Travel safely," she said, "and may your world understand the courage you showed here." He stepped onto the platform. The heir reached out and held his hand for one brief moment before letting go. The platform lifted. The palace grew smaller behind him. He didn't know what waited for him at the border. He didn't know how his world would react to the things he had seen. But he knew one thing for certain. He would never forget this world, and this world would never forget him.